Good morning. How you guys feeling this morning? You guys should be well rested. This is the late service. I asked the 9:30 if they thought they were the best service, and they were like, well, overwhelmingly, like we definitely are. And then afterwards, they had some horrible things to say about you people. I was disrespectful, honestly. No, I'm just kidding. I've always been a fan of the late service because if I could sleep in, have some brunch, and then go to church, that's the way I want to do it. And so, respect for you for being here, and thanks for having me. If you don't know me, my name is Adam, and I'm the campus pastor at our Corona campus, which is sort of the original campus that got launched about 27 years ago. And I haven't been here all that time. I was actually a senior in high school when the church was launched, and so not quite that old. But I have been a part of South Hills for the last about 14 and a half years. Which I can remember because we moved here when my youngest son was just a couple months old. And so when people ask me how long I've been here, I'm like, how old are you? And then that's usually how I judge how long I've been here. But we love being a part of South Hills. We've gotten to plant a couple campuses, and then in 2017 got asked by our board to take over the original campus, and have been raising our kids there and really love it. And that's actually how I met Brian, who is incredible, by the way. And I would tell you this, Brian has the biggest heart of anybody I've ever met. Have you realized this about him? Just such a big-hearted person, and will do anything for anyone. When I first started getting to know Brian, I thought I was his best friend, and then I realized everyone thinks that they're Brian's best friend. And it's not because he's duping all of us. It's just because he genuinely is interested in people. He really cares about people. He leans into their lives. He would drop anything and help you with whatever you need. He would rush to your house and fix your sink, even though he was on vacation in a different state. He's just that kind of person. And he was originally actually a worship leader on our campus. And when we were about to open a campus here, Pastor Moses invited him to step into this role, and it's just been so cool to see him step in and lead this community, and starting with just a handful of people and seeing how much you guys have grown and the impact you've had on this city has been incredible. And so I hope when Brian gets back, you let him know how much you love him, because I guarantee you that he has spent this time away thinking about how much he loves you and planning what he has for this community on his return. And so it's a big deal for me to get to fill in and be part of what you guys are doing. And so today, I'm actually going to wrap this series that we've been in through this month, and then next week, we're going to launch into a Christmas series, and I'm sure this entire place is going to feel like a winter wonderland. So that's going to be very exciting. That is, if people show up next Saturday and decorate instead of eating the men's breakfast. So just to reiterate, you guys are welcome in the back. So today, I want to encourage you, I don't know if you usually do this, but to take some notes. Write down some things that stand out to you. There's going to be some slides, so you can take a picture of those if there's a verse or maybe a line that stands out to you. And I just want to give you permission to not agree with what I'm saying today, but to think about it. And I think, a sermon, at least in my mind, is not the last word on a subject, it's the first word. It's the thing that hopefully sparks a deeper conversation when you leave this place. And you're more likely to remember what you wanted to talk about and think about or discuss if you capture something and take it home with you. So if you are taking notes, the title of my message today is Distracted to Death. Distracted to Death. Anybody in here a sports fan? You would consider yourself a pretty big sports fan? Okay, like 2 or 3 people. How many of you, you watched some football on Thanksgiving? That was your thing? How many of you, it was more like the shopping the day after? That's more your sport. You were like, I'm going to get these Good Friday deals. I'm going to make it happen. I've never really been into sports. I do like watching the Lakers. That's the one sport that I can get into. But the person that is sort of the most into sports I've ever met, and specifically baseball, is our senior pastor, Moses Camacho. And if you have ever met him, you already know this because he was probably wearing a baseball cap at the time, maybe even some sort of a jersey, and he loves it. And so a few years ago, he decided he was going to gather all of us campus pastors from South Hills. There's 8 or 9 of us at the time, and he was going to take us to a baseball game to his favorite team, the Angels. So pray for him, because that what What a sad favorite team. And he knows this. He knows this. But he took us, and he was really excited about this game. And I don't know much about baseball, so he was explaining to me, like, this game is a huge deal because at the time, Albert Pujols was like 2 hits away from breaking this massive home run record and having like 600 home runs. And so he was like, this is the game. Maybe he does both of them. Maybe he does one of them. I don't know what's going to happen, but we're all going to be together. It's going to be incredible. And he was talking it up, and everyone was buzzing about that. And I wasn't interested in that. I was asking everybody, like, what are the best snacks? Because that's all I really care about, right? I'm just like, I want to know. This is part of the reason why Brian and I are friends, right? He's one of the only skinny people I trust with food recommendations, right? Because normally a skinny person gives you a food recommendation. You're like, what do you know? You know what I mean? But Brian, he knows food. And so Brian and I are like, where should we go? What should we get? And the thing that people kept saying were, you got to get the nachos. There's this place, and I don't know if you've been to this place. They've got like this nacho buffet. You get them in a helmet. And there's like, they put steak on there and like, I mean, it's all the good stuff. And they're describing it to me. And we get probably like 3-4 innings in, and I'm like, you know what? I got to have these nachos. Where do I find them? And Moses trying to explain to me where to get them. And he's like, you go up the thing, and then you go down, and you go around, and you go past, and there's a Jersey lady, and then you curve around, and then you take the escalator. And I'm like, I'm not going to remember all this. He's like, you know what? I'll just do it. I'll go get it. And I'm like, dude, you don't. And he's like, no, I want to. I'm going to go get they're going to be great steak nachos. And he leaves. And, I'm not worried about this, even though he was invested in this game, and I really wasn't, because the other team was at bat, and there was no chance that Pujols was going to get up. And then what happened was, it was the fastest inning of baseball I've ever seen in my entire life. 3 of the fastest outs. It was like 2 minutes, and like all 3 were out. And now suddenly we're up to bat again. And fortunately, there's a couple guys. I'm like, this is going to take some time. The first guy immediately gets on base. Second guy immediately gets on base right away, and Pujols comes up to bat. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, Moses, where's Moses? Moses needs to be here for this. I'm starting to get nervous. And everyone is all excited because they're like, this could be like a record day, a historical day in baseball. And everyone is so amped on it, and you could feel like just the tension and the excitement in the place. Everyone in the whole stadium is praying like, God, let him do it. And I'm like, God, don't let him do it. Don't let him do it. I want to keep my job. I'm getting all paranoid. And there's a swing and a miss, and then this next ball, they throw it right in the sweet spot, and he cranks this home run out of the park, gets 2 guys in. He's slowly prancing around the bases. Fireworks are going off. People are screaming, high-fiving, kissing strangers. I mean, like, they had this thing where, like, there was this thing going off on the board, and then you know that thing where people can hold, like, different signs, and it makes a big sign? There's all these people in the outfield, like, holding up a thing that was, like, 600, and everyone's going crazy. Moses is nowhere to be found. And I'm starting to feel real nervous at this point because I'm the only person that he's getting nachos for. And he doesn't come back right away. In fact, he's gone like a whole other inning. And finally, when he comes back, he is the most upset I've ever seen him. And he's just like, here's your nachos, dummy. You know what I mean? Which I felt was uncalled for, okay? But he was clearly frustrated. And I could let it go. But instead, I chose to say, Moses, you are never going to believe this. When you left, that guy you were talking about got up to bat. And he did hit a huge home run, and people freaked out. You should have been here, man. He did not think that was as funny as I did at the time. He was very upset, and but I thought it was hilarious. And I'm like, you know what? You're upset at me now, but you did something that was kind and good-hearted, and nothing I said really meant anything to him. And then 2 innings later, I was like, Moses, would you mind going to get me some ice cream? He thought that was even less funny than the thing I said earlier. But I bring this up because I think that maybe you have experienced a moment like this in your life too, where there was something that you wanted to be a part of that was important to you, and for whatever reason, you missed out on it. And I think when we have these moments, just like Moses, we find ourselves thinking like, man, the thing that I did that made me miss this is not as important as this. And I sort of wish I wouldn't have done it that way. And I think like these moments are happening more often. In fact, they're not even just happening on a large scale. They're happening on a very immediate, small scale. I think a lot of us nowadays aren't even just missing big moments. We're missing a lot of moments. We're missing everyday moments. In fact, I wonder if you have had this sense maybe that you are just sort of living in this suspended state of distraction. That it is difficult for you to focus on almost anything because you're being pulled by all these pings and vibrations in your pocket and things that people need from you and want from you and things that are happening in the news at all imaginable moments. And it just feels like it is hard to focus on who you want to be and what you want to do in your own life. Maybe you're not totally on board with this idea, but let me just get you to critically think about it for a minute. Like, when was the last time you stood in line for anything longer than like 1 minute before you immediately pulled out your phone to start scrolling and finding something interesting to do? Or when was the last time you watched an entire TV show without also scrolling through Instagram at the exact same time, right? For most of us, we can't even remember the last time. You ever remember recently maybe really wanting to know something and you click on the article and then you realize this is going to be more than like 2 thumb scrolls and you're like, I can't finish it. You know what I mean? I guess I'm just never going to know. I guess I'll just never find out if I have diabetes. I mean, I can't read this whole thing. It's just too long. It's too laborious. How often have you had this moment where somebody that you really care about is telling you about their day, or they're pouring out their heart to you, or telling you something that's really meaningful to them, and you're trying to pay attention, but then there's the other part of you that's sort of like trying to punch through an email underneath the table, hoping they don't notice, because your attention is split. This is how bad it's gotten. This is a picture that I took at my doctor's office. This is just like a couple weeks ago. This is on the 2nd floor, right before you go down the staircase. It says, for your safety, please use handrails and put your mobile device away. And they put this up because people were tripping down the stairs after coming to the hospital because of some sort of a tripping accident, right? Like, we have to have like signs like this so that we don't accidentally kill ourselves because we are so distracted. We don't know the rules about going downstairs, even though we are adults. In fact, I read this thing that statistically 1 out of every 2 people just during the course of a church service will get distracted into their phone. And so if that's not you, feel free to judge the people on your road that does apply to. I'm just kidding. Some of you are like, I was taking notes. I wasn't even on Facebook. What I think is interesting, there's a whole grouping of research to this now. And one of the most astounding figures is that we now, in our culture, we pick up our phone roughly every 7 minutes, and we spend approximately 5.5 hours a day staring at our pocket-sized screens. And this isn't surprising when you think about the fact that they were designed to be as addictive as possible and have probably sucked you into that addiction. And what is it that we are looking at when we're staring at them? Usually news feeds, headlines, hot takes, rage bait. Not stuff that's usually making us into better people, calmer people, more Christ-centered people. And this comes at a cost. There's this really popular verse from the New Testament, the writings of the Apostle Paul. You've probably heard this before. It's in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, where he says, fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable, which sounds great. And I love this verse, one of my favorite verses. But what I've been wondering lately is, what happens when you're no longer able to fix your thoughts on anything because they're constantly being hijacked by technology? By the 24-hour news cycle, by the group text that you're a part of, by all these calendar alerts and the opinion that somebody just posted, and that rumor that's going around about that guy you used to work with, and the constant anxiety inside about being judged by somebody else by everything that you've ever said, done, or posted in your entire life. All this stuff is sort of pulling at us at all times. And it begins to rot away our ability to focus. And if you have trouble focusing, you are not alone. In fact, recent studies show that the average amount of time that a young adult can focus on one thing is now approximately 19 seconds. And the average working adult stays on task for a maximum of 3 minutes at a time. That's not a great workflow. Our attention spans are eroding at an alarming rate. And our distracted state is actually rewiring our brains. There's been this long-term sociological, neurological research study that's really attempted in the last 6 or 7 years to really try and figure out like the trends that are happening to what our lack of attention or our diminished focus is actually doing to us. And they narrowed it down to really 4 things that I want to just read to you because I think that they're astounding. The first thing that is happening to us is that when our focus diminishes, we forget instructions, fumble details, and make frequent mistakes. And you probably had this before where you're having a conversation with someone and you think you're paying attention, and then halfway through you're like, I haven't heard a thing you said. You know what I mean? Like, you don't say that out loud, but you're just lost, and you realize you were like thinking in your head, or you're paying attention to like the buzzing in your phone, or thinking about what you're going to get for lunch, and you have not been following the instructions, and now you have to kind of make up what you think that they said and try and go do that thing, and you're kind of getting, and even when you're trying really hard, it's like you can't fully figure out what it was you were supposed to do. You just miss stuff. The second thing they've discovered is that you end up settling for simple explanations and authoritarian solutions, because nuance disappears when you can't pay attention for very long. Everything has to be black and white. It has to be oversimplified for you to actually grab hold of it, which means everybody you meet has to be either all good or all bad, because you can't handle any other details or perspectives other than the ones you already possess. And so you just want somebody to take charge and tell you what to do and crush all your enemies. The third thing they've noticed is that when your focus diminishes, you can't develop and sustain deep relationships. And so even though this is this thing that we all want, like deep connections with other people, everything ends up just living on a surface level. Like you can't really be listening to all these other people's opinions and ideas and stories and feelings. You get to this place because you can't pay attention where you're just like, listen, if it's not about me, I'm not that interested. You don't want anything that's complicated in a relationship. You don't want anybody that's difficult or dramatic, human. Really what you want is like, I want a relationship with somebody that's like basically like a people version of a dog. You know what I mean? Somebody just every time they sees me, they're just like, and they have no opinions. They have no thoughts of their own. They never push back against anything I ever say. And the last thing that they discovered is that you end up doing what's easy because everything else takes too much focus. So if you can't get what you want quickly and without much effort, then it's just not worth having. Or you over-spiritualize it and think like God is saying no, when it could just be that maybe good things just take effort. They take work and devotion and dedication. But when you lose your sense of focus, delayed gratification becomes the devil, right? And it's just something that you don't want to have anything to do with. Now, this isn't to say that because you're losing your focus and end up in this place that you are doing anything. In fact, you are probably far from lazy. Most people in our culture are not. They're doing stuff all the time. But constant busyness is starting to make us feel lost inside our own lives. Like our stories are no longer our own. Like our attention and like what we need to do with our time is constantly being hijacked by everything else instead of steered by our own value system. And it leaves a lot of us getting to the end of a day or a week and being like, man, I was so busy, but I feel like I didn't do anything. And there's a sadness in that self-realization. Because you're like, man, what is all my doing? What am I even accomplishing? Am I even who I want to be anymore? One of the foremost experts on this is a guy named Cal Newport, who wrote this book called Digital Minimalism. And there's a line in this book that every time I read it, just like, I sit with it and it just feels so stunning to me. He wrote this. He says, you simply cannot give in to an entire ecosystem of digital distraction and still wield meaningful control over the direction of your life. In other words, like even if you have a decent job and good friends and a loving family, most of us are so consumed with distractions that it's hard to appreciate or prioritize anything that is truly important because everything just becomes one big wall of noise. everything just becomes something else pulling us in a different direction. And we begin to feel numb to it all. And everything begins to feel meaningless. And so what do we do about this? I don't know. Let's close in prayer. Lord, no, I'm just kidding. Wouldn't that be horrible? I just tell you that the world is ending, and then, like, Brian, he was the worst speaker. He made me feel bad about my life, and then he went to lunch, and we just sat there. I think it's interesting because, like, this is not a new problem. Even though we have more technology than any other time in history, like, people experience this same sort of distracted state, even in Scripture. And I want to read you some excerpts that point to this. There was actually this guy who was considered to be one of the wisest men who ever lived. His name was Solomon, and he wrote some of the wisdom literature that became part of what we now think of as the Old Testament. And he's at a place in his life where he writes this one particular book where he's sort of bottoming out a little bit because he has the ability to do pretty much anything. He has so many options and choices and resources, which sounds like a lot of modern day Americans, right? And he's being pulled in so many different directions that he feels like he's losing control of his story, and he's just sort of like just trying to keep up with it all. And he writes this in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 14. He says, everything is meaningless, like chasing the wind. He says this in chapter 2, verse 23. Our days are filled with pain and grief, and even at night our minds cannot rest. Does that sound familiar to you? You ever do that thing where, like, you're so exhausted throughout the whole day, and you're like, if I could just make it to sleep, and then you get in your bed, you get all snuggled down, and then you're like, why am I wide awake right now, right? And your brain is running, you're thinking of all this stuff, you're worrying, your brain is asking questions that you're like, I don't need to know the answer to that right now, but I'm going to Google it anyway. And this is what he's experiencing as well. He goes on just a chapter later to say this in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 19. He says, when you think about it, people and animals all share the same fate. Both breathe and both must die. So people have no real advantage over animals. How meaningless. This guy is spiraling, okay? This is the only reason I read you this verse. It's just like he is descending into, like, I don't care about anything. Nothing matters. He's either really depressed or a little bit high, right? These are the only time we have these kinds of thoughts. He's in this territory. And, like, like, when you read his story, it starts to make sense why his thinking is in this place. Because every time he feels overwhelmed, every time he feels stressed or pressed or spread thin, he finds himself not going to God and processing through his life, but actually just guzzling down more distractions. And I can't say that we're all that different. I mean, let me ask you this. When you feel overwhelmed in your life, what is the thing that you immediately reach for? I mean, is it really time with God? Or if you're honest, is it just your phone? Maybe some of you, it's not your phone. Maybe it's something else altogether. Maybe it's just drive through. You're like, man, I am bummed, but you know what? Anything with a Mick on the front of it is going to make me feel so much better in my heart. And it works for a moment, and then it doesn't. Maybe for you, it's not that at all. Maybe for you, it's a loveless hookup with somebody that you don't even like, but it's at least better than being alone. Or maybe for you, it's something else entirely. It's the endless stream of office gossip. It gets you involved in caring about anybody else's problems but your own. Maybe it's just waiting excitedly for the new season of Nobody Wants This. Not as good as the first. Just going to throw that out there. It makes you wonder, like, is there a better way? Because here's the thing that I do know. You can't defeat distraction with more noise. Right? If your issue is that you are so distracted that you can't focus and actually become the person you want to be, just piling on a bunch more better distractions is actually not helpful. You have to strip it away. And this may surprise you, but when we look to the life of Jesus, he got overwhelmed too. And when he did get overwhelmed, he had a certain way of dealing with it that I think that gives us the way forward in our own lives. It says this in Luke chapter 5, verse 16, talking about a season in which Jesus is overwhelmed, and it says that Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness to pray. Now, Jesus didn't have a smartphone, in case you're not sure when those were invented, not here. But everywhere he went, people wanted his attention, right? And there was political turmoil everywhere. I mean, we think that we live in a politically contentious time. If you do your homework and look up the historical time of 1st and 2nd century Roman Empire, man, that was insane. And Jesus is in the middle of it, and people want him to comment on it. And he knew that he only has so much time to make his mark on humanity, but it is really hard to stay focused on who you are and what you're there to do when everyone else has all these strong opinions about where you should go and what you should do and how you should dress and how you should talk and how you should do this and how you should do that. And Jesus is experiencing all that, but in the midst of it, he doesn't numb out. He responds to the disorienting distractions in his life by making space for silence and solitude. Now, if you are an introvert, you're just like, oh, thank God, right? I am in. I love this. Finally, this guy gets me. This is what we need in our lives. But if that's not how you naturally are, this doesn't sound as comforting to you. Like if you are a FOMO-prone extrovert who feeds off noise and energy and all of like the people-iness around you, this is like my daughter who is like literally will call us from one party, planning another party, and then going to another party after that. Like she just loves it. And maybe if this is you, when you hear that the answer to this constant distracted lack of focus, chaos in your life is silence and solitude, you're like, I always thought that's what hell was going to be like. But in fact, it may be a path to actually find yourself again. And this is why you're going to have to make space for it, because it's not going to happen naturally for you. You are going to have to do it intentionally. And it tells us here that Jesus went to the wilderness, which, really is just a word that means somewhere quiet, free from distractions where he could be alone. And for him, it was usually somewhere in nature. In the stories of Jesus, it was like a field or an olive grove or the sea. This is probably something you can't do. Jesus could walk on water, so he could go out in the middle of the sea. Nobody could get to him. It's brilliant, right? Great way to be alone. For you, maybe it's just like a place in your backyard or a quiet car ride or a local park. But I would tell you that you don't just need quiet time. You need quiet time alone with God, where you are acknowledging the presence of God, where you are allowing God to sift through your thoughts with you and bring you comfort. And I think this is what frustrates some of us, because as we critically think, we're like, well, wait, isn't God everywhere? Can't he do anything? Shouldn't God be able to comfort me or talk to me or tell me something everywhere? And yes, he can, but just because God can speak to you anywhere doesn't mean that you have the capacity to hear him everywhere. A lot of times because the noise around you is blocking out what he wants you to see and hear. I think a lot of us, we become so acclimated to the noise of our everyday lives that we get out of touch with who and what is most important around us. We don't even realize what is being drowned out because we're just so familiar with how noisy everything always is. All three of my kids are teenagers now, but when they were much younger, my brother-in-law, for the first time, he invited us to come visit him. He owns this piece of property in Tennessee, and he was like, come out and stay in our cabin. And we were really excited, and all three of our kids were really, really small. I brought a picture of this guy. He's 16 now and 6 foot tall, but this was him when he was real, real tiny during this stage of life. And his mom definitely cried when we had to cut his hair because he got lice. And that was a really sad day. She was like, he's not a baby anymore. I'm like, that kid is 5, okay? But he did look like we were sending him off to war because he had a buzz cut. But during this stage, in fact, I think we took this picture of him on this trip. And we tucked the kids in at night in this cabin. It was like this 2-room cabin in Tennessee. And the other 2 fell asleep. And we're in our room. And then he sneaks in to where we are. And he's like, I can't sleep. And we're like, what's wrong? And he's like, it's too quiet. It was like creeping him out. Because he grew up in California. In fact, we lived in this condo at the time that was actually by this main road. And so to him, Like the things that he was used to that made him fall asleep were like cars driving by, honking, people yelling obscenities, you know what I mean? Like he's like, that just knocked him out. Out in the woods, there's nothing. There's no sound of an air conditioner. There's no fan noise. There's nothing. There's no cars driving by. There's no people anywhere. So we're explaining to him, like, everything is fine. It's okay. Go lay back. I went and tucked him back in. And he sneaks back in the room. It's like 5 minutes later. And he's like, I can't sleep. And I'm like, we already talked about this. It's just going to be quieter here. And he's like, no, there's bumping. I hear bumping. I'm like, what is he talking? So I go in his room. I'm looking around. I can't figure out what he's talking about. And then it occurred to me, what he is actually hearing is his own heartbeat. Because he had never been in an environment that was so still and so quiet before that he could actually get in touch with the beating of his own heart. And so once he actually did get in touch with his body, it freaked him out. And some of you have had this experience, right? Where like you were so distracted by all the noise in your life and in your world that when you do have a still moment to get you in touch with your real feelings, with your real sensations, with your actual body, you're like, what's wrong with my arm? You know what I mean? Like you realize that there are some things that you have been ignoring. I think a lot of us find ourselves here, which is why Jesus invites us to prioritize the stillness. And I think this is what noise does to us. It separates us from ourselves. It fractures and fragments us. In fact, I would say that distraction disintegrates us, but silence and solitude reintegrates us. It puts us back together. It makes us whole. It puts us in touch with our own heartbeat again. It helps us make sense of things. It refocuses us on who and what is most important. There's one poet in the Old Testament who said it this way, Psalm 23, verse 2. He says, God makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. Doesn't that sound great? Like when you just think about the implications of that line, how would it feel to walk out of a moment with God and feel like you have a fresh soul? Like instead of your soul feeling beat up and weighed down, like if it just felt light and fresh and clean and relaxed. I wonder for some of you, when was the last time you felt that feeling? This is where silence and solitude lead us. And it's not just something that you need once. It's something that you need on a consistent basis. These scriptures tell us that Jesus did it often. Like one example is in Mark chapter 1, verse 35. It says, before daybreak, Jesus went to an isolated place to pray. And later, the disciples went in to find him, and they said to him, everyone's looking for you. But Jesus replied, we must go on to other towns and preach in them. That's why I'm here. And so he traveled on. In other words, Jesus is being pulled in all these different directions. All these people have opinions on what he should do. There's all these needy people with legitimate needs grabbing at his time and attention, and he goes off to an isolated place to pray. And by the time that people come across him, he has gotten complete clarity on what he is to do and not to do. It's in his silence and solitude that he gets an understanding of what to say yes to and what to say no to. Because it's not until you set aside distractions that you start to see what you have been distracted from. You see, if Jesus did everything everybody else wanted him to, he wouldn't have done the thing that he was supposed to do. And I think the same thing is true of you. That if you allow yourself to be pulled in every imaginable direction and try and make everybody in your life happy and try and keep up with every single account and comment and prompt, you are going to lose sight of why God has you here. I wonder, what are you at this season in your life too distracted to give your attention to? In a way that's actually costing you. Is it your health? Is it your finances? Is it your marriage? Is it your friendships, your relationships with your kids? I wonder what it is. And I know some of you are thinking like, I don't know. And I would like to know, but I don't have time to slow down long enough for God to tell me what I am running too fast to recognize so that I can fix it, because I'm already doing too much to slow down and learn that. But what I think is interesting about the Jesus story is that the busier and more distracted Jesus felt, the more he prioritized silence and solitude. And I got to tell you, if Jesus, who's God in human form, knew he needed this, you need it even more, because you are not as good as Jesus. I love what St. Francis de Sales, father of our faith, said. He wrote this, that every one of us needs half an hour of prayer every day, except when we're busy. Then we need an hour. And this is so funny to me because we go the other way, right? It's like, I'm too busy to slow down and do that. And what he's saying is like, listen, the more chaotic and crazy your life is, the more overwhelmed you feel. Instead of actually writing off time with God to go get the stuff done, if you spend time with God, you're actually going to fuel yourself up to have the ability to go face everything that exists out. And in fact, God is going to give you clarity to know which things you don't even need to mess with in your life. And a lot of us, man, we just have a hard time doing this. In fact, we do the opposite. It's when we need quiet time with God the most that we avoid it the most, which is why we need a community of people that understand our value system, that will encourage us to slow down, to catch our breath, to care for our souls. Jesus did this with his disciples. In Mark chapter 6, verse 30, it says, this is a time when the disciples go out on this ministry trip and they come back. And it says that when the disciples returned from their journey, Jesus said, let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while, because there were so many people coming and going that none of them even had time to eat. This has ever happened to you? You ever been so busy, so anxious, so preoccupied, you didn't even have time to eat? You forgot to eat, which typically is like one of your favorite hobbies, right? You are so busy taking care of everybody else that you forget to take care of yourself. You get lost in the shuffle until somebody comes up to you who really cares about you and is like, whoa, 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 hey, time out. Have you eaten? You seem tired. Are you sleeping at night? Are you okay? When was the last time you took a break to do something for you that you like to do? When was the last time you got to tell somebody about what's happening in your life that's stressing you out? When was the last time you just took a deep breath and sat on the beach with no expectations? We need these moments in our life, and we need the people in our lives that push us to them. Because the truth is, no matter who you are, you have limits. And it is better to realize what those limits are before you push past them, because that's when the real danger comes. I would say that part of the reason silence and solitude is important is that it reminds us that there is a God and you are not it. I don't know if you realize this, but like, you are not responsible to fix every problem you saw online yesterday. Like, we know that intellectually, but some of us are carrying the weight of it, right? Civilization is not going to collapse in the 20 or 30 minutes that you take to care for your own soul. God has things for you to do, but like, the world is not reliant on you to keep on spinning. In fact, Jesus, multiple times when he was only on earth doing ministry for 3 years, right? It was the time of his ministry time, from 30 to 33. He would take 40-day stints away from everyone to recalibrate his soul. If he could do that without the world collapsing, you can take 20 minutes. Sometimes we just feel like that's not possible, and yet it is. And we don't believe we can, because constant stimulation in our life keeps us preoccupied. But stillness brings perspective, and perspective is the building block of peace. It's when you zoom out and realize that it is not all yours to carry, that you can take a deep breath. And this is something that's reiterated constantly by the Apostle Paul, who wrote the majority of the New Testament. Like in the book of Romans chapter 12, where he says, don't copy the behaviors and the customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. And then you'll learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. In other words, what he's saying to us today is like, listen, I know everyone else around you is glued to their phone, freebasing influencer opinions all day long. I know everyone else you know is multitasking and running 1,000,000 miles a minute and never takes a break. I know everyone else allows their entire nervous system to be regulated based on the recent rage bait headline. Don't copy these behaviors and customs. They don't work. And come on, you do not need a preacher or the Bible to tell you that. You can look around and see that this is true in the world around you. You already know this. I think Jesus invites us into silence and solitude because it allows us to engage the world from this heartbeat that is calm and hopeful. This process that this verse talks about of God transforming you into a new person by changing the way you think is something that our tradition calls discipleship. And I want to just read you the definition of this word. To be discipled by something is to follow it, devote your time and attention to it, allowing it to teach and shape you. Does that sound more like your relationship with God or your relationship with social media? I mean, if you're really honest, all of this, if I'm honest, makes me think of Diet Dr. Pepper. Which is obvious, I know, to you guys. I love it. How many of you drink Diet Dr. Pepper? You just admit it. It is delectable. If you haven't, get used to it. It's what we're going to drink in heaven. It is magical. I used to be a Diet Coke person. I made the switch, and I really feel like it has helped my journey. But I drink a lot of it. I drink more than I want to admit, so much to where my wife is scared sometimes. She's like, you need to drink more water. And some of you are like, yeah, what about water? And it's like, not as big a fan. But like, I have it sometimes, okay? This is really for show. But like, I sip it, right? I sip water, but I chug the Diet Dr. Pepper. I had one on the way here. I'm not going to lie to you guys, okay? And so did my dad. I'm going to sell him out as well because he was in the car with me, and we're addicts together. And so I guess what I'm saying is that, like, I have this tendency, because this is what is crazy. Like, I know intellectually, because I've done the research, Diet Dr. Pepper is actually chemically arranged to make you more thirsty. So when I get thirsty, I am drinking a thing that's actually making me more thirsty. And I'm like, you know what will solve this? More Diet Dr. Pepper, right? In other words, like, I am chugging what is only going to make me more thirsty and only sipping what will truly satisfy. And I think, like, is there a better picture of a lot of our relationship with social media is we are so worn out and torn down and pulled in a million different directions, and we're exhausted and we're overwhelmed, and we're like, you know what will help? I'm going to go and look at more overwhelming things online. And we find ourselves just like guzzling down everything that is just making our soul more thirsty and only sipping what will satisfy. You cannot all week long go out and just bear hug all of this stuff into your life from all these different sources everywhere that is pulling on and draining you, and then show up to church on a Sunday and get a little sip of the Savior, and that actually make everything all right. At most, Pastor Brian has, an hour and a half with you guys a week? That is not enough to combat the 5.5 hours a day you are being overwhelmed with whatever you are taking in on your phone. I think for a lot of us, the reason that we feel so overwhelmed and exhausted and anxious is because in reality, Jesus is not the one discipling you. Your phone is. And it's not working. It's a bad behavior and custom. And this is why I want to give you some homework today. I always give homework when I preach, and if you don't like that, I'm probably not going to be here next week, so somebody else might not do that. And nobody's grading it, just God. So if you want to let him down, that's fine. No, I'm just kidding. This is just for you. This is for your own benefit. This is what I would challenge you to do, is to just twice this week, to take 20 minutes and just to sit in silence with God. Whether that's just going out in your backyard and sitting and breathing, focusing your thoughts on God, inviting him into the conversation you're already having inside of your own head. Breathing deeply, asking him to give you his perspective over like some influencers or politicians or your own. inviting him to direct you which way to go, to what to say yes to and what to say no to, and just to sit in his presence and allow his calm to settle in over you. I wonder what would happen if you just spent 2 20-minute windows doing that this week. What impact it would have on your soul. It's a start. I think that God might leverage that to begin to move you out of a sense of chaos and anxiety into a place of peace that only God can really bring you to. And I know maybe there's part of you that's just like, I don't know, it sounds like something for like nuns and monks and people without jobs or kids. And I get that, right? But it doesn't have to be, right? And also, I mean, if you think about those people, they seem pretty chill, okay? So like maybe you want a little bit of what they have. And this is one thing I love about Jesus is he's always like, listen, don't just take my word for it. Try it. Test me. See how it works in your own story. Because I think when you experiment with the way of Jesus, you find what you were looking for all along. But you won't know until you do. And that's what I want to pray into your life today, that God would give you the ability, the courage to actually try his way and see if it isn't the best way. Would you bow your heads across this room so I can just pray for you?
South Hills Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that he's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text any amount that you would like to 84321. And the 3rd way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the 4th way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, or whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you to trust God with your finances so that he can bless and anoint your finances and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you and thank you for watching our online service today.